Sometimes you're G yes, sometimes you're G no. What's the ceiling for the Raiders?
Ceiling for the Raiders. No, I'm G. No!
There we go.
No!
Double.
What, the ceiling?
Yes.
They will not make the playoffs for the fourth straight season. That's the ceiling. Obviously, they're not in the Chiefs League. I will take the Chargers over them, and right now they're the fourth best team in a four-team division. I will give them a shot at surpassing Denver, a shot, and I'm probably shortchanging the Broncos, but no, this doesn't change. He's the best quarterback they've had in a while. I'll give him that. It's not a bad move, but no, they're not going anywhere.
Okay. So he's the best quarterback they've had since Rich Gannon, but what's the thing Brew does? This?
Yeah.
When he's proven correct on things? Nice to see that the greatest quarterback of all time and I have something in common, a fondness and correct evaluation of Geno Smith. Oh, so who agrees with me that Geno's actually quite good? Tom Brady. Who disagrees with me? Brew. I'll take the GOAT with respect over Brew. So then check one for me.
All
That's
GOATs
don't
make the greatest personnel
I'm just
moves.
telling you, the Raiders, since they went to Vegas, they've played 5 seasons. They have everyone in the AFC West but the Chiefs. The ceiling is obviously second place. But 3 of the last 5 years, the Raiders have finished in second place. Their ceiling is now second place. Now, is that a playoff season? I don't know. Every year there's a team that was, a bottom, finished last in their division that finds a way into the playoffs. And so I have to see the other moves they make. But I like Pete Carroll. I like Geno Smith. I like that they got Crosby locked up. I disagree with Brew in this regard. Right now, my money would be on Denver being the worst team in the AFC West, not the Raiders. I think that the reason the Raiders were so bad last year was they might have had week to week the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL, save for maybe New England or a couple other spots. But regardless, the point is that this is a good move, and I think it cements the AFC West if people like Bo Nix as the best quarterbacking division in the NFL, because every other, like the NFC East and the NFC North, there's a team in both of those divisions, Minnesota with a totally unproven, unknown quarterback, and in the NFC East, the Giants, we don't even know who their quarterback's going to be. And so, I think second place in the AFC West is the ceiling, Greg.
Yeah, I disagree with you on this one. I'm with Brew. I don't think their ceiling really changes. I don't think they make the postseason. I think they've improved, obviously, at the quarterback position. You talk about the last 3 to 4 years about the Raiders coming in second place, but what you're not talking about is the fact that the Chargers now have Jim Harbaugh as a head coach, and that has changed who they are.
Raiders have Pete Carroll.
And the Raiders, I get that.
Raiders went from the worst coach and quarterback in the division by far.
I totally understand that, and I'm going to see what Pete Carroll does, because the last time I saw him with Geno, it wasn't great. And so for me, when you look at even the Denver Broncos, when you got Sean Payton with a quarterback that he actually wants at the quarterback position, he had success. So I'm not ready to say that the Raiders are going to end up second. I would opt out on saying, or opted in on saying, that they would finish dead last in that division again, but they would be a better team because they have a better quarterback and they have more stability at that position. It gives them a bridge to possibly do something next year as far as a quarterback, because they're not picking at number 6. They're probably not going to get a quarterback that they're wanting to spend the first.
Yeah. Okay. This is good because I had already kind of talked about the move of Geno Smith to the Raiders and what it means, for the Raiders and what they're looking to do. So I kind of like this more like specific question about what's the ceiling for Vegas. And no, I'm sorry, I don't immediately crown the Kansas City Chiefs as just they're automatically number 1, and so the ceiling can only be 2. Because also, the question is, what's the ceiling for Vegas? Are they saying just next season, this coming season, or just in general? Now that you have Pete Carroll and Geno Smith, and if we're saying just in general, well, then I'm going to say win the division. Listen, there's no doubt about it that the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Chiefs have the head start. That's obvious. That's very, 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 very obvious. This whole, when we keep using words like, oh, this team is the worst team in the division or they're last, the problem is that gives me feelings of like when we're talking about, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Colts, and we're talking about the New York Giants, and before the Commanders got Jaden Daniels, the Commanders, and it's just like they're the worst and this and that, and it's like it gives the impression that these are just fundamentally bad teams in this division. Now I'm talking about the with the Chiefs, the Raiders and company. And I don't see it that. I see this division now finally being elevated because it was a trash division for years and years and years. And the Chargers were a mess. And the Raiders were a mess. And the Broncos were a mess. And the Chiefs just got to just take advantage of that. And I think that those days are 1,000% done. And I declared that last season. Now that the Broncos and the Chargers came up on, and everyone said, "Oh yeah, that's right." They're like, all the Chiefs fans were like, "Oh yeah," everyone says that every year. And then what happened? The Broncos and the Chargers made the playoffs. Yeah, seems pretty good to me. And so I think that those teams will continue to take steps forward, and I think the Raiders are going to take a step forward. Listen, it's always tough when you have a division like this because, right, then it's just like, are you all going to make the playoffs, or are only one of you going to make the playoffs? Like it's too hard to predict in terms of like what the rest of these teams are going to look like around the AFC as a whole. But so what I'm the most comfortable saying is what's the ceiling for Vegas is that they're going to actually be legitimately competitive. That it's not going to be one of those things where it's like, oh, they could maybe beat the Chiefs, but it doesn't actually really matter. Like last year if they beat the Chiefs, or the year before that, it was like, yeah, hooray, we beat the Chiefs on Christmas or whatever it was, and it's like, that's cool and it feels good, I guess, if you're a Raiders fan, but like at the end of the day, it's like doesn't really mean much of anything. I think that the Raiders will actually legitimately be competitive. I really do believe what Chip Kelly will want to do with this offense. And I think, again, it's this combination, and this is what I've been on this ever since they got Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly, for that matter, that it's this duo, this coaching duo of the two of them, that they both 100% know exactly what they want to do on their side of the ball. There is no figuring it out. They have their plan. They know what they want to do, and they've both proven to be able to execute it in multiple different situations, in technically different, NFL eras, quite frankly, or just football eras as a whole. And so I think is if you bring the maturity of Geno Smith and the maturity and experience of a Pete Carroll and now the offensive vision of Chip Kelly, as long as they get the personnel pieces, in place, yeah, they can win these close games and these, back and forth games against the Chiefs, against the Chargers, against the Broncos. Depending on what other specific moves are made, when we look at the Broncos, the Chargers, and the Chiefs, especially last season, so many of those games were all really close, especially when like everybody was like legitimately playing, throughout the final game for the Broncos versus the Chiefs. And obviously you can even include the Raiders, but I'm keeping the Raiders in isolation just for a moment because the other three teams are the ones that obviously made it to the playoffs and had, quantifiable success. All those games were really kind of like, you had to really zoom in. You couldn't just look at the box score. You had to really watch the game and watch how they unfolded. And it wasn't very clear. You couldn't really say with a high degree of certainty who's the better team. Sometimes when you watch these division games, because we know a lot of division games can be close, but it's still very obvious who's the actual better team, right? There was years before Jaden Daniels went to the Commanders again, the Eagles and the Commanders would play each other close, but it was obvious that the Eagles were on a different level. It was like, obviously the Eagles are the better team. And it was very obvious, even though it's a close game, you can still clearly see it, right? You can still clearly see it. From my viewpoint, when you were watching the Broncos, the Chargers, and the Chiefs, yeah, you know that the Chiefs are more organized in these tight moments, so you can give them that leg up. But at the end of the day, when you're watching this game unfold, you're really kind of like, hey man, if they face each other in the playoffs, you didn't have that degree of confidence. I even said, listen, if the Broncos play the Chiefs in the playoffs, or the Chargers play the Chiefs in the playoffs, or the Broncos versus the Chargers, I'm like, I don't know, man. That's a who's who. And again, let's go back in time. If the Chiefs, or excuse me, if the Commanders were playing the Eagles, or even the Commanders, well, the Commanders and the Cowboys definitely were more separated. But the Eagles versus the Commanders, I'm like, in the playoffs, like, yeah, the Eagles are going to win that game. And it was without a shadow of a doubt. And I can do that with other divisions as well. But those are just the most recent ones that hop to my mind. When you now bring in the Raiders in those games, they definitely played them close, and it did give you the feeling of, well, these are just division games, right? When it really comes, when push comes to shove, does this team really know how to come away with the win? And when we saw a perfect example was actually both Raiders games against the Chiefs, where you were just like, you actually could have came away with that win, and you can make the argument that you should have, but you clearly were not ready. The quarterback was not ready. The coaching staff was not ready. And the players were not ready. Yeah, you were playing them close because the players want this win so badly, so they're going extra hard. Everyone's fighting each other. You know each other, etc., etc. Now you're actually adding the coach. You're adding, on both sides of the ball, you're adding the coach that now knows how to deeply handle these situations. And you're adding a quarterback who at this point has a tremendous amount of experience in the NFL, who can still play, who plays at a really good and sometimes even great level. So yeah, of course this team is going to be legitimately better and significantly better. To me, the rest is, what else are they doing in free agency? And, do they get lucky in the draft in terms of, like, do their draft picks hit? They obviously have to be smart in the draft, but also there's also a tremendous amount of luck in the draft, and it's like, do they hit? So yeah, I think that this team, you're not going to tell me that you're going to, let's just say you had this exact same team, but now you added Geno Smith, added Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly, and you're going to tell me that this team isn't significantly better? You're going to tell me that team couldn't have beaten the Chiefs now twice with this new cast? If it was so close without the upgrading in coaching and quarterback, you don't think that that's enough to be a difference? I don't see how, because then we would be saying essentially that the Raiders did nothing to improve. They didn't improve in coaching. They didn't improve at quarterback position. And if that's the case, then I don't know who these guys are then. Then who the heck is Geno Smith? Who the heck is Pete Carroll? Who is Chip Kelly? Then I don't understand. It wouldn't actually make any logical sense. So there has to be an upgrade. There has to be an upgrade. And these teams were already kind of so close to each other in the first place that how does that not significantly change things though then? And as of right now, you can make the argument, because they're the ones that have to make the most amount of moves right now because they had the most to improve. They are the most improved right now out of this division. And again, I think that the Broncos are going to get better just by virtue of Bo Nix is going to be better, and they're going to make the moves that they need to make. And again, I think the Chargers and Herbert are absolutely going to be great. And again, it also will depend on some of their moves. The Chiefs, obviously, they were just in the Super Bowl last year, and they're making their moves, but, they have to kind of figure out exactly how they're taking their step forward. But they're also going to have some weird issues where it's like Rashee Rice is most likely going to be suspended. I know the whole thing with Xavier Worthy, like, I don't know. They're not going to press charges, but then he also, choked someone. So I'm like, I'm not going to try to predict what happens with that situation, but obviously weird stuff. So who really knows? I believe that the Chiefs are still going to be a great team, but listen, I think this division has the potential to be so much closer than people are giving it credit for. And if you can't see that, adding a Pete Carroll, Geno Smith, and Chip Kelly to this Raiders team, even if everything else was exactly the same, if you can't see that that's a huge step forward, that alone has to be worth like 3 wins. That alone has to be worth 3 wins. I don't see how it could not. If that was the case, then coaches and quarterbacks just don't matter. And if coaches and quarterbacks don't matter, then I don't know what matters in the NFL. I don't. So, that's the way I see it. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Las Vegas Raiders? What do you think the ceiling is for them? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.